How's it going, everyone, and welcome all in for another edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer. Before we go any further, be sure to hit the subscribe on the YouTube channel and then also follow the podcast on social media, unofficial WCC pod, wherever you are following on social media, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. We've gotten some, not necessarily big news, but we have some more schedules that have come up. USF has announced its full schedule. Portland has announced its completed schedule. The WCC Tournament has also been announced. So we'll be able to kind of see what that format looks like, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Some comments from Mark Few regarding and on a number of topics. Jon Rothstein talked with him on the College Hoops Today podcast. We'll get to some of his comments later on as well. But I want to start with the first big prognostication on the WCC standings going into the year. And that does come from Mid-Major Madness. They put out their WCC picks, not only 1 through 11, but then also put out their Player of the Year, Newcomer, and Freshman of the Year. So I think we're going to get into that. And I think there's some interesting notes here. So without further ado, let's kind of dive into that. So at the bottom here at number 11, I'm not terribly surprised to see them down here, Pacific. Maybe the first big surprise for me on this list was they picked at number 10, Oregon State, which to me feels like way low for the Beavers. Number 9, San Diego. Number 8, Pepperdine. 7, Portland. 6, LMU. Washington State at 5. San Francisco at 4. Santa Clara 3. St. Mary's 2. Gonzaga 1. And for the most part, this is kind of in line with what I kind of think too. The top 4 are right where I have them all at the moment. Washington State, I could see that flip-flopping one way or the other. LMU kind of being right there in the middle makes a lot of sense. It's the Pepperdine one seems high, Pacific seems low, and Oregon seems really low. And again, like that's just thinking about what we have seen from those programs over the last few months. Oregon State still has a ton of talent to me. Like it seems wild to see them down at number 10. I don't think that they've been able to bring in even the talent or they brought in more talent than the Pepperdines, than the Pacifics, than the San Diegos, and even the Portlands for me at this point. I know Portland has a bit more continuity coming back, but Oregon State has a lot of talent, and and especially considering like one of the late additions they actually did bring in, and he's going to be a true freshman, but Maxime Logue is coming in from France, newest addition for Oregon State. He looks really good. He looks really athletic. I could definitely see him getting a good chunk of minutes in his first year at Oregon State. But overall, I'm looking at these standings. There's not the big surprise is Oregon State to me. That's just wildly low. And even they noted when they tweeted it out on Tuesday that there is definitely some like mix and match up and down that you could definitely have with that bottom tier of the WCC, and that's absolutely true. I mean, San Diego was at the bottom, or at least I had them at the bottom a year ago. They ended up being the 7th place team. So there's definitely or 6th place team, sorry. Some movement that can happen there at the bottom. I think Pacific's going to be right there in the mix. I thought they did a lot of really good things. San Diego is kind of the big mystery. Steve Lavin did have a lot of mystery guys a year ago. And they ended up actually being able to put something together pretty quickly. So I think there's at least a fair amount of faith in what San Diego is going to be doing. So again, like I think there's a lot of moving pieces here. That bottom 7 through 11, Portland, Pepperdine, San Diego, Oregon State, Pacific, really, to me, is going to be interesting to kind of watch as that goes along. But that Oregon State one, man, that is, to me, is the wild one that really sticks out. But also they predicted 3 of their awards as well. The Player of the Year, Newcomer, and Freshman. Player of the Year, they had Graham Ike, which I can't be mad at. Like going into at the end of last year, that's who I was picking as the player of the year. This is someone who was a couple of years ago was going to be the preseason Mountain West player of the year. So we know what Graham Ike is capable of doing. He's going to be a full year into the Gonzaga system, more than a full year into the Gonzaga system. So I think it's much more likely he's going to hit the ground running this season. And if he plays all year long, like we saw at the end of last year, and if not better, I think it'd be very hard to not see him end up with player of the year. Newcomer of the year, they did kind of put a caveat, and I would put a caveat on this as well. They did say Carlos Stewart, who transferred back to Santa Clara from LSU. And man, it's like Carlos Stewart is one of the more exciting players in the league. That's what he was before he left. That's what I think he's going to be upon returning. That Santa Clara squad is a ton of talent, but they needed another 1A scorer, another top of the line scorer, and that's exactly what Carlos Stewart is going to be for them. And this was a guy who was scoring 15 a game before he left. And yes, did not have a very good year at LSU. So him coming back to Santa Clara, knowing the system like he does, being there right alongside Adama Ball, I think is going to be really exciting to see how that all starts to play out with his return and within that system that obviously he's going to, again, talking about another guy who's going to be able to hit the ground running. Carlos Stewart is another one of those guys. I'm good on that pick. The interesting one to me was the freshman of the year pick. And there's going to be a number of guys who get a lot of opportunities this coming season. And they went with the St. Mary's freshman, Mikey Lewis, who is, as I have talked about off and on, is someone I'm really high on going into the year and moving forward for him at St. Mary's. This is the sort of immediate impact freshman that could really change the ceiling for the Gales. He's a score first two guard, like he's going to be able to get them buckets. I don't think that the level, like him jumping up to college, is going to impact him all that much on that front. He's also not going to be asked to do a ton. This is also a team that does bring back the player of the year, does bring back the defensive player of the year, does bring back a lot of good pieces. So Mikey Lewis is not going to be asked to do a ton, which I think will allow him to kind of grow into that role a little bit more. Not saying they're the same position, but maybe similarly to what Dusty Stromer was supposed to have gotten a year ago when he got to Gonzaga and initially was supposed to sit behind Steel Venters, but was thrust into it, obviously, because of injuries. He played really well at the San Francisco Pro-Am over the summer. So this is a kid who I was high on going into the year. A lot of people are also very high on. So I think this is an interesting pick to me. I don't know if I would have gone so heavy onto that right away. But I think it is, at least for me, it feels like validation that, like I'm not the only one seeing what could be from Mikey Lewis in this first year with St. Mary's. And with all of that, this kind of sets us up to kind of look a little bit forward. Obviously, what are the standings going to be and all of that sort of stuff, and how does that play into the WCC tournament when we get to March? And we now have a schedule for the WCC tournament, and it doesn't look all too much different from what we've seen in past years. We still see the multiple bye system. The 1 and 2s will not play until the semis. 3 and 4 will not play until the quarterfinals. The only thing that really changes, I think the biggest difference, is going to be say goodbye to the off day on Sunday, which I honestly, personally, am very okay with. I did not like having the extra day in Las Vegas. I would rather, again, for someone who is not huge on the city of Vegas, or at least being there for long stretches of time, one fewer day there is fine by me. But this tournament is still going to start on Thursday with the 10-11 matchup. That's going to then filter right into the 7 through 10 round. So this is still going to be really a long tournament. It's still it's going to be, I think it's 6 rounds now between that and the end of the tournament. But the bye seeding, the bye system remains intact. So that is one thing that will remain constant. I know a lot of people don't like the system that the WCC has. It's not even necessarily the bye system. It's just like the length and probably the format of the earlier rounds that kind of bugs more people. And I'm kind of in that boat as well. Like, I'm not a huge fan of that system earlier on. And I think the WCC is also at the point, or very close to the point, where even the auto buys to the semis are not necessary for the 1 seed and the 2 seed. At one point, the reason for that was to limit the number of times that Gonzaga or St. Mary's would have to play the bottom tier of the WCC more than once, more than twice. It was a way to kind of reward them, one, by putting them deeper into the tournament automatically, but also so that for potential tournament seeding, NCAA tournament seeding, you weren't concerned about having to play another one of those 250, 300 net teams. I don't think that's, not to say that obviously, like, we saw what Portland was last year, we saw what Pepperdine was last year, we saw what Pacific was last year. So I'm not saying that those teams aren't still like that, but I think there's a way to format this tournament that doesn't do that. And I was just taking a look at an 11-team format, which, yes, the WCC will have an 11-team format this year. They will jump to 13 next year, but then they will be back to 11 most likely the year after that and moving forward. And in my mind, I think there is another way to set this up that actually works somewhat well. I think you can have this be a 4-round tournament. So I'm chopping off 2 full rounds of this thing with the 11-team format. The way I look at it is you have 6 teams in your round 1, and I'm giving 5 buys to the quarterfinals. So seeds 1 through 5 all get buys to the quarterfinals. So 4 and 5 in that quarterfinal round would play each other, and then 1, 2, and 3 will play winners of the previous round. That's this first round I'm talking about. And those are a 6 and 11 matchup, a 7 and a 10 matchup, and an 8-9 matchup. So then you move that up to the quarters. 1 will play 8-9, 2 will play 7-10, 3 plays 6-11, and then you have the 4-5 game. From there, you play as you normally would. Like, you have your 1 seed side of the bracket, which includes the 4 or 5 seed, your 2-3 side of the bracket as well, until you get to the final game. But I'm chopping off 2 rounds. I'm still giving 5 teams a bye now. And yes, will the 1 and 2 seeds still have to play one of those teams, an 8-9 seed, a 7-10 seed, one more time? Sure. Is that going to look great metrically? Not. It's going to be a non-factor unless they lose to those teams, which at this point, how often do we expect St. Mary's or Gonzaga to lose to those teams that are that low, especially Gonzaga? And when's the last time that Gonzaga's lost to anybody in this league that was lower than 4th, 5th place? Like, this, it doesn't happen to that squad. So while metrically it may slightly negatively impact them, I don't think they are at a point where anything that happens in the WCC tournament impacts their seeding, nor even over the last few years has anything that's happened in the WCC tournament really impacted St. Mary's seeding. They are kind of who they are by the time they've gotten to Las Vegas. And really, like, what this does, at the very least, it levels the playing field maybe a little bit more for the Santa Claras, for the San Franciscos, and now the Washington States, or even when Grand Canyon does join the league. It levels the playing field a little bit more for them as they then have to battle with these squads in the WCC tournament. Because even as a St. Mary's person, it is a bit comical how automatic the WCC tournament does end up being. The fact that this is now going on to year number, 16 at the Orleans Arena, a neutral site for the WCC tournament. And no one other than St. Mary's or Gonzaga has won the WCC tournament since. Not BYU, not USF, not Santa Clara, not San Diego. Nobody has won that tournament other than those two since they moved to Las Vegas. And I would like there to be some more mixing them up. And yes, that is still on all the other teams in the conference to make that case and prove it to everybody else that they belong in that conversation. At the same time, I don't think those games are hurting Gonzaga or hurting St. Mary's as much as they may once have in the metrics and doing all of that. So my reformatting of the WCC tournament, crunching that down to four rounds. Seeds 1 through 5 are autos to the quarterfinals, and then we go from there. So something interesting came up, kind of was related to the WCC tournament on the College Hoops Today podcast with Jon Rothstein. He was interviewing Mark Few and talked about a number of different topics. Great interview. I suggest you go and listen to the full podcast on SoundCloud. Really, really good info about like the Olympics and what the Zag team's going to look like now. But one of the notes I took that I think I've thought about a number of times over the last few years is how much for Gonzaga, how much even for maybe St. Mary's, does the WCC tournament success matter? How much does winning that event matter for these two teams? And especially when you look at the success that Gonzaga has had in the tournament, in the NCAA tournament, and the up and down success that St. Mary's has had, but consistent appearances in that tournament, what really is important for these two squads? We know that everyone wants to win. We know that they want to win regular season titles. They want to be able to win the WCC tournament. It's not a matter of one. It's what is the bigger goal? And I'm just going to play a clip from that interview where Mark Few really kind of dives into that conversation.
From our perspective, you get into to be honest with you, especially where we are as a program, with sights on Final Fours and national championships, you have that on one shoulder, and then on the other shoulder you have this, this crazy competitiveness that you want to win every game you play, even practice games and scrimmages. But, rational thinking, you're like, okay, we don't need to get anybody hurt in this tournament, quite honestly. We got bigger things down the road.
I thought that was really interesting because, again, he's right. Like, Gonzaga's ultimate goal is not winning the WCC tournament. It's a nice feather in the cap, but it is not the goal. Their goal is now national championship. Their goal is Final Four. And I think St. Mary's is also kind of at that point. Not necessarily, obviously, not national championship. Obviously, like, everyone's goal is, yes, you win a national championship. But to me, the internal expectation for what St. Mary's is now is going deep into the tournament. They've gotten to the tournament multiple times over the last 5-6 years, over Randy Bennett's tenure. They've reached the Sweet 16 once, and that was back in 2010. Do they get to the tournament? Yes. Have they won games in the tournament? Yes. Are those big deals, especially for a school of St. Mary's size? Yes. Those are all accomplishments that should be celebrated. But that doesn't mean that you're not at many times left wanting more. That the team that maybe, like, honestly, like, that Sweet 16 team back in 2010 is the team who, had they not won that conference tournament, would not have been in at all. And they went on a run. And part of the question there that Jon Rothstein brought in was like, what is the value of winning those tournaments or not winning those tournaments? And yeah, I think like for that St. Mary's team, it did mean something because it gave them some sort of momentum. But also later in this interview, Mark Few talked about how at this point, losing the WCC tournament doesn't impact them seeding wise. That's about where they were going to be anyway, losing the St. Mary's or not. And probably same goes for the other way around. Same thing would have been true of St. Mary's had the roles been flipped. Maybe not. Like maybe they would have actually slipped maybe one seed line. But you know what? Those two at this point, the last few years, the only thing that's really changing is who gets to have the bragging rights at the end of the season, Gonzaga or St. Mary's. And now and this is something I thought about when I made the trip up to Spokane for the NCAA tournament to watch St. Mary's up there this past year. As a fan, it was great for us to win the regular season. I was really excited for that to happen. I was really excited to see them beat Gonzaga in the WCC tournament, which also hadn't happened. The combination of those two hadn't happened in a while. But what stung was then watching Gonzaga advance further than St. Mary's in the NCAA tournament, which most people would probably say, especially most fans would say, that was the greater accomplishment, getting deeper into March. And as a fan, that's what stings, because I can't deny that. Like that part is what hurts a little bit more. Like, yes, you got the parts that give you some level of bragging rights, but was it really what matters in the long run? Are those the accomplishments you want to think about at the end of the year? Or do you end up thinking about what didn't happen in the NCAA tournament? Now, I think for different teams, like these are different scenarios. For Gonzaga, yes, their expectations are higher. They've had success in the tournament. They've been to the Final Four. They've been to national title games. Their expectations are different. St. Mary's expectations are going to be different from theirs, but theirs are higher than the USFs and the Santa Claras. For USF and Santa Clara, it's get to the tournament. That is going to be like the big feather in the cap, is just getting there, getting back to that tournament in USF's case. And so for them, yes, Vegas means more because it likely is their only opportunity to get in. So each of those games means a lot. For St. Mary's over the last few years, for Gonzaga almost every year for the last 25 years, it's a stepping stone to what are they going to do in March. Gonzaga is working on 9 straight Sweet 16s. They've been into 2 title games in the last 9 years, 8 years. This is a team that is not going to be looking at what their success in the first weekend of March means. They are judged now by what they do in that second week, that third week, that fourth week, and even possibly that first week of April. All right, so transition a little bit more down to a few of the schedules that we did get to see get released. USF and Portland both had their full schedules be released over the last few days, and USF talked about it with Rocco Millard just last week about USF schedule and what they've been able to put together. And that was kind of right before they finalized what that was going to look like. And it does look solid. It's like they do have a very capable schedule if they're able to get the key wins. They have Boise State at home. They're going to be playing Memphis at Chase Center, even though there's been some chaos in the Memphis program over the last week or so. The Sunshine Slam, they'll have Clemson in that first game, Fordham or Penn State in that second. St. Louis is a really good game for USF, and that's going to be in December, so we'll see how that one plays out. We know Santa Clara also plays them. Loyola heading out to the Midwest to take on Loyola Chicago is another big one. We know that this Loyola program has had obviously great success over the last few seasons, but this is not the same level of a Loyola team that we saw 4 or 5 years ago that made that deep run into the tournament. But this is still a great opportunity to get out away from San Francisco for the Dons to show what they really have. They have that game at Bradley, which is their one true road game, which is a little concerning that they only have one true road game. At least for me, I would like to see them have more than one based on just the type of schedule, just based on the type of team and resume that they're trying to build. More than one, I think, would have been helpful. And then also Montana on that schedule as well. But this USF squad, this USF team is going to be judged on how they do against these squads. I do not know like what this is going to look like, because honestly, like, I think the biggest piece that they're going to miss from last year, and maybe it was a piece that I didn't think was going to be nearly this important, was Jonathan Mobo. Like, I thought he was just so critical. I don't think he was so critical to what they were able to do and how they played defense, how they ran through the offense through him. He gave them so many different looks, and USF might be able to have the pieces that kind of fill in those gaps or whatnot. I've talked about it a lot. I really like that core of guards that they have between Malik Thomas, Ryan Beasley, Marcus Williams. That's a really good crew that I think is going to do a lot of great things. But we've also seen USF teams with great guard cores, but they have to have that presence inside. And they also have to just, again, get some of these tough games. That is not what they were able to do a year ago. They still have to take care of business against all the other teams, but you got to get some of these good ones. And USF at least is setting themselves up to have the opportunities. Maybe not great opportunities like high net games, but there's a lot of top 100 teams that are involved in the schedule that is going to put them in the position to be in position when we get to late February and early March. And then Portland also released theirs, and honestly, like, it's a solid schedule. And Portland, I think, is going to be trying to do. I think they have a huge uphill climb. They do have a couple of non-D1s on that calendar, but they have a great test against Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara is going to be a good squad this year, and they'll be hosting them up at the Childs Center. They'll be heading down to take on Oregon in Eugene. They have Long Beach State on the road. They have Kent State on the road. These are good games for this squad. And then you have the likes of Kansas City, Cal State Bakersfield, Lafayette. There's some games that should get for this Portland squad. And then at least a fair number of tests before they get the conference play, which honestly, it is going to be rough. I do think that this is a team that's going to have a lot of growing pains throughout the course of the season. And they will at least have some level of opportunity to kind of get some level of momentum before we get to conference play in late December, where they will start off with the two newbies in Washington State and Oregon State. All right, and just to wrap it up, I did want to just talk a little bit more again. Like I mentioned him earlier, the new Oregon State ad, Maxime Logue, coming in from France. This was announced just this past week. He was on the FIBA U18 team for France, 6'9" forward. Seen some film on him. He looks good. I liked his athleticism. I liked what he was able to kind of do. He does play a lot around the rim, so I don't think we're going to see him kind of stretch the floor really in any way. But this is a guy who can get it if you throw it up to him and he's in the right spot. He can be that screen and roller. He can be that rim runner for Oregon State. And again, I think it's going to take him some time to kind of develop into someone who's going to contribute on a regular basis for them. But a lot of talent. And I think that for Oregon State, at least that's going to be step one, is as they join a new league. He does look like a guy who can develop in the WCC and really contribute early on. Maybe not right away in the non-conference, but as we get deeper in the conference play, this is someone who could end up seeing a few more minutes and be successful in those. All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube and then also follow on social media at Post by Zach and then also unofficial WCC pod. All right. Well, that'll do it. Thanks a lot, everybody, and I will catch you later.